every second. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Microphone. Oh my God, I almost forgot my microphone. Welcome, everybody. Sorry about that. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. It's been a while that I've forgotten my microphone. This is not a new one, but an old one. I know you need the map. You'll get your damn map. Just hold on. Actually, first I was going to thank Carlos Bond. Thank you, Carlos, for that. And yes, I see the request for the map with the name that Casanova? I'm going to go with Casanova, being what that says. Let me get my TikTok rolling. The map will be used this episode. Fear not. Fear not. Let me just see here. I'm just remembering coffee talk. I've got to set up a coffee talk for this weekend. There we go. We'll talk about that in a minute once the TikTokers join us. Anyway, hello, everybody. As always, do your introductions, where you're from, if you would. And there you go. All right, TikTokers are arriving as well. TikTokers, hello. I see you guys coming now. Good. Maybe introduce yourselves. Just kind of say who you are, where you're from, or at least where you're from. If you don't want to say who you are, that works too. Oh, hey, Jana. That's right. Popopalus. Interesting. Sounds Greek to me. I mean, literally. Hello. Oh, thank you. Great CFI for the gift. All right. Hey, guys. We've got a hefty show tonight. A lot of news. So, mix of, I don't know, good or bad, but a lot of news. Ireland. Hello, Ireland. Hey, Oregon. What else we got? Vancouver. Melbourne. Oh, hey. I feel like we don't get enough. Oh, in Victoria, too. We've got the Australians are in the building. I feel like we don't have enough Australians here usually because the time of day is screwy for you guys, isn't it? I always forget hold on a second. Hey, Google, what time is it in Melbourne, Australia? Oh, 10 a.m. Not a problem. Just blow off work. That's not so bad in Australia. Anyway, welcome, folks. All right, we got a critical mass on TikTok. I will get rolling. Hey, guys, welcome back. This is John Aravosis with the Aravosis Report. As you guys know, this is my daily show where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine for about half an hour. And then the second half of the show, I go through your guys' questions. Now, just to remind you, I've got the TikTok folks here on my iPad. I've got YouTube and a whole bunch of other folks, Twitch and Twitter and everybody on my laptop. And this is why you will see me pivoting back and forth. I'm not a crazy person. It's that I've got multiple screens up. What else to tell you? On TikTok, if you've got questions, and again, second half of the show is questions, use the Q&A link that's in my profile. You can submit some now. Even if you've got thoughts too, because a lot of times when we're talking about the news, I always appreciate your guys' input, but a lot of times I will ask for your input because sometimes, frankly, there's some of you that know more than I do about the military stuff, or frankly, just what your opinion is, on what the Russians are doing, whatever. So feel free to put those as well. Same thing for you guys. I do appreciate the gifts on TikTok and the super chat questions, super stickers on YouTube. I am doing this for free. I've been doing it since the war broke out at the end of February. Actually, I started my first live right at the beginning of, thank you, 6 Hour for the hat, right at the beginning of March of last year. And I've been doing it full time for free. And I'm basically paying the bills with your guys' contributions and your donations and your gifts. Thank you, Nurse Boyer, for the gift there. I even took an allergy pill before the show, but of course my Ukraine war allergy is kicking in like it always does when I start with you guys. Thank you, Alan, for the duck. And one other thing, real quick. I swear we're starting the news right now. Putin's threatening nuclear war again. Fun show. We got a fun show. Thank you. That was with Lee's for the nachos. The thing to tell you really quick. Oh, and the confetti. I'm sorry. Who was the confetti? MM. Oh, thank you, MM, for the confetti. Okay, real quick. I was going to tell you, Saturday, we're going to do another coffee talk. Coffee talk is my Saturday morning show where we sit for about half an hour with, thank you, BJG, where we sit around for about half an hour or so on TikTok for the paid TikTok subscribers. TikTok has a function which you can access during the lives where you can become a paid subscriber. It's like $6 a month to support the creators. And as a thank you, every Saturday morning around 10 a.m. Eastern Time, US, I will sit with you guys and just have a chat only for the paid subscribers. All right, let's get rolling. So, Moscow is hinting at crazy stuff for the anniversary of the war. As you know, and I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Russians invaded. Thank you, Webedeb. The Russians invaded on February 24th. We are already, that's 22 days away. So we're 3 weeks away from the 1 year anniversary of the war. And the Russians being the Russians, they wouldn't be the Russians if they didn't make vague threats about things. So listen to this. The Russians are hinting at doing something to gain the world's attention on the anniversary of the invasion. Thank you, Ellen, for the hat there. Lavrov, who's the Russian foreign minister, said Russia is planning to overshadow pro-Ukrainian events around the world to, honor the 1 year anniversary. He said Russian diplomats were working on something. I love this stuff. Like, ooh, scary. Oh, thank you, Didar. That's very generous of you. I don't have all the gifts down as far as, how much they cost, but I know the gold mine is a generous one. I mean, they're all generous, guys, so I appreciate it. But I do try to do a special shout out when I know someone went kind of the extra mile. So thank you for that. That was very sweet of you. Thank you. So we're working on something to ensure Western-led events in New York and elsewhere were not the only ones to gain the world's attention. Now, I will say that one of the concerns is that the Russians are planning this big new offensive, which am I talking about? I think I am talking about the big new offensive. Let me see here. If I've got that further on down in the notes. Well, not really. We can talk about it right now. So the Ukrainians have been talking that they think the Russians are up to something in the next 2 to 3 weeks, that they're going to have some kind of big attack. The thinking is based on the timing of things, but also evidence on the ground. I was talking in yesterday's show about how the Ukrainian government has been increasingly worried the Russians are up to something. They've been seeing a lot of movement on the ground. They've been seeing in eastern Ukraine, and I will get out the handy dandy map. I wasn't using it enough yesterday for people's pleasure. Eastern Ukraine, which is over here, okay? Just to remind you quickly, Russia over here. I mean, Russia's huge. It's like 11 time zones, so it's not just over here. But Russia is over here in terms of bordering Ukraine. The land that Russia is occupying in Ukraine is more or less all of this and this. This is Crimea that the Russians invaded and stole in 2014. And this is the land that they invaded this time around and still control. The thinking is that the Russians are going to make some kind of invasion in the east, like a bigger push. It could be, well, frankly, it could be anywhere around here. I mean, the lands the Russians are still trying to get that they really care about tend to be around here is what folks are thinking the Russians are going to do. Now, as far as what that is, we know the Ukrainians are going to be getting a lot of new tanks from the West, and that's great, right? A lot of German tanks, British tanks, American tanks, maybe even some French tanks coming up. Great news. I've been worried, and I think we're starting to hear this more now from the other experts, that the Russians might try to say, Putin especially, Putin has been micromanaging this war from the beginning, and basically in a way that a leader shouldn't. Now, in America, the president is also the commander-in-chief of the military. Having said that, and again, you military folks will know this better than I, during a war, you really don't want the elected leader kind of running the show. I mean, meaning day to day. He shouldn't be sitting there day to day going, I think we should move another submarine over. Basically, like you're playing Battleship, like you're playing a computer game. He just shouldn't be the guy picking where the troops go and everything else. Generally speaking, right? D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. That's the kind of thing you talk to the leader about. Fair enough. But day-to-day troop movements, you don't. Putin, on the other hand, has been doing just that. He has been talking to the individual generals and giving them orders and really kind of screwing things up. Well, in terms of what's happening the next few weeks, my concern has been that knowing that the Ukrainians are going to be getting tanks from the West, knowing that these tanks are going to take a couple months to get there. Thank you, Natchinoda. There you go for the sunglasses. Knowing that they're going to be getting these tanks in the next 2 months, Putin would probably order his troops to do something before that. Right now, the earliest that the Ukrainians were going to get the Western tanks, mind you, we're talking the first tanks, might be in a couple of weeks. A lot of them were talking about the end of March, early April, but those were, first of all, like the beginnings of getting the tanks. They weren't like Ukraine will get all of its tanks mid-March. Nobody was thinking that. So it would make sense if the Russians were going to try to do something, they would try to do it the end of the end of February or early March if they were trying to beat the tanks. That's what the Ukrainians are concerned about. We also heard a retired British, basically top Air Force guy, whatever you call the Air Force in Britain, saying the same thing, that he felt like they were going to do something in the next 3 weeks. Thank you, PJ, for the Aflac duck. In any case, so there you go. That's the concern of what the Russians are thinking of doing, that they're basically, Putin needs a big victory. And I might as well mention this too. I've gone through a lot of the detail yesterday, but the Russians have been using the Royal Air Force. There you go. The RAF. There you go. The Royal. Well, so it is an Air Force. You called it an Air Force. Fair enough. The Royal Air Force, the RAF. Putin, the Russians have been throwing men like crazy at the Eastern Front. We've talked about the town of Bakhmut a lot, and you've heard about it. The biggest fighting going on right now is around the town of Bakhmut. Bakhmut is more or less here where my finger is. It's right east of Kramatorsk. It's right southwest of Severodonetsk. Kramatorsk, by the way, which is right west of Bakhmut. Kramatorsk is where that big missile strike was yesterday and where the Russians hit again today. If you remember, if you saw the news at all, you saw how the Russians destroyed a residential apartment building in eastern Ukraine. That's Kramatorsk. That's right next to Bakhmut. That whole area is where the most fighting is really taking place right now. Now, in any case, Bakhmut. Oh yeah, I was saying to bring up Bakhmut because what the Russians are doing is they're throwing crazy number of troops at this town. Thank you, J Plow, for the universe, or for the galaxy, I should say. There, they've been throwing the Wagner mercenaries. It's been mostly them that have been fighting there. Thank you, Stephen. But they're also now including regular Russian troops. But the Wagner group, I was reading about this today. It was kind of crazy, the detail of basically. Some of the Russian military folks have been talking online about the orders they've been getting, and they've ordering these guys in groups of I believe it was groups of 8. And they're basically making them seize land by saying, you are the first group of 8, more or less. And I'm summarizing this, but thank you, Addie. In order for them to move up on the Ukrainians, they're not using tanks. They're not using infantry fighting vehicles. In other words, they're not using vehicles they can hide inside of. They are literally ordered and told, you need to take the ground by that tree. I don't know, 100 yards up, 100 meters up, whatever it is. We want you to get as many men as you can by that tree, and we don't care if you die. And you 8 men, if you don't succeed and you come back, we will shoot you. So these guys have no choice but to basically make it. And they run as fast as they can, basically. And they try to get near the tree, whatever it is. Whoever survives digs into the ground to protect themselves and hangs something from the tree or something nearby. And, whether it could be a handkerchief, whatever. And that lets the next group of 8 know where the next safe place is. They make it to the safe place, and then they've got to make it again another 30 yards, 100 yards, whatever. It's this insane, the very definition of cannon fodder. The reports have been for weeks now in Bakhmut that Russian soldiers, there are literally piles of dead Russian soldiers on the battlefield, and the other Russian soldiers are just running over them. I mean, it's horrific. In any case, that's what's going on in eastern Ukraine. It's possible the Russians are going to have a even bigger assault. Now, keep in mind, that's some of the concern as well. There were some estimates I saw today from the Ukrainian side saying the Russians could be sending as many as 300,000 or 500,000 men across the border in this assault happening in the next 3 weeks. Now, will they? I don't know, right? Is it disinformation from the Russians? Could be, but there is concern that they're basically, they have no problem. Thank you, Dark Phoenix, for the mirror gift. They have no problem using their men basically, like I said, it's just throwing them and getting them killed. And if you end up throwing 500,000 men, across the border, you can do some damage even if the men aren't that qualified. Thank you, Max, for the hat there. Let me move on with this. So the Kremlin is very upset about the tanks. I was telling you about the tanks. We all know about the tanks, right? The German tanks that are coming, the French, the American tanks, the British tanks. This from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov today. This one I thought was hilarious. As new weapons are delivered by the collective. Oh, thank you for the happy beach for the duck. As new weapons are delivered by the collective West. Thank you, BJG. Russia will, listen to this, as new weapons are delivered by the collective West, Russia will make greater use of its potential to respond in the course of the special military operation. In other words, if the West is going to move in tanks, we're going to take greater advantage of our potential to respond. What that means is, I mean, again, the language is ridiculous. What the Russians are saying is, oh, they're not even talking nukes. We haven't done everything we can do. We've got lots of things we can do. We've just chosen not to do it 11 months into a war that we've kind of been losing, right? Thank you, JP, for the air dancer. But now that you're sending tanks, oh boy, now we're going to do that extra thing that we should have done at the beginning, but we've been waiting to do for no reason, right? And the suggestion is that if we didn't send the tanks, the Russians wouldn't be doing this extra thing that they're going to do now. Why wouldn't they be, right? I mean, why does it matter if we're sending tanks? Shouldn't the Russians be doing everything they can do to win this war, short of nuclear weapons, of course, right? The nuclear weapons don't make sense for them, but everything sensible, and when I say sensible, I mean everything that makes sense militarily for the Russians to do, everything that advances their cause, shouldn't they be doing it, right? They don't need us to send tanks to make them, thank you, El, to make them finally say, oh, now we're, I mean, you get what I mean? Like, your country's under attack. And it's as if you've got tanks and extra troops and extra weapons and you're not using them. And because the other guy upgraded his weapons. Now I'm going to use my better weapons. I mean, you guys get what I'm saying. It's criminal negligence what the Russians are claiming here. That basically there's more they could do. They just simply chose not to. They thought it was more fun to fight an 11-month war that they've kind of been losing. I mean, again, they haven't lost, this new offensive. They may actually do well with. I mean, who knows? But it's just utter garbage what they're saying. I was going to say, make sure you follow and follow me and subscribe. I always forget to ask you guys that on TikTok and YouTube and elsewhere. Please do click that subscribe button, click the follow button, especially on TikTok, so you can follow my news during the day. Putin threatened nuclear war again today. Now that should be, some of the folks set up a bingo card that they can write down the different things I say during the show that I repeat and say most of the shows. We talk about nuclear war a lot. I think maybe there already is, there definitely needs to be a nuclear war slot on the bingo card for the show, because the Russians bring it up all the freaking time. I mean, it's ridiculous. Well, Putin did it again. He was giving a speech in Volgograd, I guess it's called, which is new as of many years now, named for Stalingrad, right? Stalingrad, huge battle in World War II, a battle that really sort of, I guess, broke the spine of the Nazis. And it is the 80th anniversary right now of that time, of that battle. And Putin was giving a speech there in Stalingrad, Volgograd. And listen to this. Putin says, by the way, what he's going to say right now, he's talking about the Americans. He keeps trying to blame the Americans for the war and claim that, oh, the Europeans, they don't want to be in the war. Oh, no, it's the Americans who are making them. The Europeans don't want to be in this war. I don't quite get what he's even doing. I don't get, because the Europeans are very happy to be supporting Ukraine, right? It's not like they're upset about this, right? But listen to this. Those who are dragging your European countries, including Germany, into a new war with Russia, those who expect to defeat Russia on the battlefield, apparently do not understand that a modern war with Russia will be completely different for them, meaning different than World War II. We are not sending our tanks to their borders, but we have something to answer with. And it will not end with the use of armored vehicles. He's saying that he's going to nuke the West again. I am not going to do the long description, but since we get new people here every day, I will do the short description of why this is BS. Russia has nuclear weapons. We have nuclear weapons. If Russia fires its nuclear weapons, we will fire our nuclear weapons back, and it will be the end of the world. Not just the end of the world, it will be the end of Russia. Russia knows this. We know this. This is why we will never launch nuclear weapons against Russia first, and it's why Russia will never launch nuclear weapons against us first, because we are mutually assured of destroying each other, and that's been sort of the concept from the beginning of nuclear times, has been understand that our nuclear weapons, even though they're really scary and it would be nice if we can get rid of them, but let's face it, there's no way to uninvent nuclear weapons. Our weapons have mutually assured that we don't attack each other. So for Putin to make this comment like, oh, you just wait, I'm going to nuke you. It's, as I've said, he's threatened this. I mean, this is not new. Putin doesn't often threaten it himself. Usually he has other people. Crazy drunk Medvedev threatens a lot. The crazy guys on TV like to threaten it. His crazy little TV shows they've got in Russia, the nightly TV shows. But it's just, how many times do they have to do? I just, it drives me crazy. Anyway, a new bust of, going along with the 80th anniversary of the victory in Stalingrad over the Nazis, a new bust of Stalin was erected in Volgograd on Wednesday, yesterday. Just a reminder, Stalin killed tens of millions of Soviets. For those of you who don't know, horrific what Stalin's reign was like. Millions of Ukrainians he killed and starved to death. Tens of millions of Soviets overall. Thank you, Dudike, for the boat. Very generous of you. It's really creepy the degree to which Putin is trying to bring back the love for the Soviet Union. There's no reticence about it. So the fact that you would, Khrushchev? What are you talking about? 1953 to 1999. I mean, the fact that you would idolize Joseph Stalin after everything that the Soviet Union has been through is really screwed up. And you see this because you also see the Russians. The Russian troops in Ukraine, they often have this when they take over Ukrainian town, they raise this flag. It's red like the Soviet flag. It has the hammer and sickle like the Soviet flag, and it has these words about commemorating the anniversary of World War II or whatever. The thing is, they're commemorating World War II, first of all, because they're trying to pretend they're beating Nazis in Ukraine, right? Thank you, Duncan, for that. They're commemorating it by waving a Soviet flag, which is insane. It's really screwed up. It's really screwed up. Hang on a second here. Somebody said I should go back and look at what Otan Bot was posting. All right, let me look here real quick. Hang on. Otan Bot over on Twitch, I believe. Hang on. Not easy to go back and find, folks, once the thing scrolls by, just so you know. I'm going to give up in about two. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I already know about the balloon. Yeah, I know. That's okay. I don't know if you were asking about the balloon, but I'm not sure how that's relevant to what we're talking about right now. Okay. Yeah. I mean, anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about the balloon later, but the balloon has nothing to do with Ukraine. So, all right, let me keep going here. All right. Discord. Oh yeah. So we have a Discord set up, by the way, just to do a quick little plug for that, to remind you guys, if you want to help out, but also, help out my work, because I am doing this full time and I'm not getting paid. You guys pay me. So I appreciate one of the ways that you can support me with the gifts on here. So please do keep the gifts coming, TikTok and YouTube, but also with our Discord. The Discord community is free. So feel free to come by anyway. It's discord.aravosis.com. You can find it on TikTok just by going to the link in my profile, the link that says Linktree. Go there and all my links are there. You guys, aravosis.com, you can find it. But it's a great place where people hang out. We talk about all these issues. We talk about sports. We talk about recipes, our pets, Ukraine, Iran. I mean, you name it, right? The other neat thing is we've got a lot of auctions going on there, and the auctions are cool things that we've been getting from Ukraine and auctioning them off, and 50% of the proceeds I channel back into Ukrainian to help Ukraine. Some of it military, some of it for thank you, Happy Beach, for the meteors. A lot of it for humanitarian aid, some of it for military aid. We helped buy some drones recently for the military. We've bought generators and backup batteries for the military, lots of other things. And the other thing is we also have auctions. I'll just show you really quick because I do show these every day. We've got auctions like cool commemorative stamps. These are the Ukrainian tractors pulling the Russian tanks. I'm selling some of these. We've got cool bracelets from the Ukrainian government. Thank you, Jesse, for that. Cool bracelets from the Ukrainian government commemorating the battle at the Azovstal steel plant. It was the Azov battalion fighting at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. The government made, with the last batch of steel from the plant, they made these bracelets that they were selling, actually. They're not making any more. They've run out of steel, but we've got a bunch of these. You can see it's got the cool Ukrainian thing on it, the trident on it. And finally, and I just finished, actually, this just auctioned today. We just sold this. I've got 2 more boxes left, and that's it of these. These are Russian fighter jets shot down by Ukrainians. And these are 2 pieces of the Russian fighter jet shot down by the Ukrainian military, which is totally cool. From a Ukrainian charity, basically, I had to donate $200 to the charity that then helps the Ukrainian military. And as a thank you, I got several of these boxes. So very cool. But this is already spoken for. Dan, congratulations. Dan with 2 N's on TikTok. I mean, not TikTok, on my Discord. You just won this today. So thank you. And we will have more, but go check out the Discord. All right, guys, let me, and anybody who keeps asking about the Discord or anything else, mods, if you can just help them out just by giving the address again, or frankly, either of you all on YouTube, just erevosis.com will get you there. And for you guys, just going to my profile or erevosis.com will give you all of my links. So it makes it easy. All right, let's keep going. So missile strikes. Thank you, Marcy, for the flowers there. The Russians yesterday, or it was yesterday or the day before, horrific missile strike in Kramatorsk. Kramatorsk, I was telling you, against civilians, they blew up a Ukrainian residential building, basically an apartment building, destroyed it, absolutely destroyed it. Kramatorsk, as I was telling you, is right here, eastern Ukraine. It is currently, I don't want to say occupied, it's not occupied, but currently the Ukrainians run it, right? Thank you, Jesse, for that. The Russians do not occupy it yet. So Ukrainians are in control. It is right next to Bakhmut. As I was telling you, Bakhmut is here. Kramatorsk is the city right here, the little yellow dot right there. And the Russians blew up this apartment building, and they sent 2 more, they think it's the S-300s that they're using, which are basically anti-aircraft missiles that are not meant to be shot at buildings. They're really inaccurate to shoot them at buildings, and the Russians are using them as a means of terrorizing the civilians. They're, again, war crimes. They're basically just shooting these at cities, letting them hit wherever they are. So, of course, they're hitting the civilians. And they shot in the same area today that they shot yesterday, 2 more missiles today. CNN was there, their crew, and the missiles hit within 30 to 40 yards. A yard is the same as a meter, basically, 30 to 40 meters from the CNN crew. So we're talking 90 to 120 feet. I mean, crazy, right? Water real quick. But just very bad, horrific scene on the news again. Clear war crime because they're targeting civilians, but you know, this is what the Russians do. Politico, there's a little bit of I don't want to say a scandal brewing, but people are getting a little bit fed up with some of the U.S. military folks who keep speaking out. We do believe CNN. CNN is one of the best news sources in the world, actually. Yeah. Mikhail, absolutely, you should believe CNN. The Pentagon doesn't think Ukraine can retake Crimea. Now, we had comments a couple weeks ago, end of January, from General Milley, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, so the top uniformed military official in America. Okay, he made comments about how didn't think it was basically possible for Ukraine to sort of take back its territories this year. Well, now Politico has a piece. Politico is a very well-respected political publication here in Washington, D.C., covering American politics in D.C., federal politics, and saying that the Pentagon doesn't think Ukraine can retake Crimea soon. Thank you, Timothy, for that. Ukrainian forces are unlikely to retake the Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula. 4 senior Defense Department officials told the House Armed Services Committee lawmakers during a classified briefing. And of course, the lawmakers leaked it to Politico. Now, the Ukrainians have not been very happy about this, of course. Part of this strikes me, and what they're saying is there's no way Ukraine can get back all of the territory, especially Crimea. Now, this is the territory the Russians annexed in the last year. This is the territory, Crimea, that the Russians took in 2014. What should be noted here? This is the territory the U.S. is very worried about Ukraine winning back. I have told you guys from the beginning, and I got some crap for this at the very beginning, not from you guys as much, but from folks on TikTok, on Twitter especially. Everybody was upset at me because I said Biden is fine-ish with Ukraine getting this territory back that it lost just last year, Biden is freaking out about Ukraine possibly getting Crimea back. He doesn't want Ukraine to get Crimea back. Biden, I think Macron, I think Schultz, other governments, I don't think so. I mean, nobody cares about Hungary and Turkey because, they're idiots. But as far as the major governments, they're the ones I think that are trouble. Brits, probably not as much of a problem. And Biden has been worried, and Biden, frankly, has been leading the charge in terms of the coalition here, has been worried that taking Crimea back would be escalation, right? That word they love to use. We don't quite know what it means, right? Escalation seems to mean helping Ukraine. Helping Ukraine is escalation, right? But the idea is, oh my God, Putin will freak out and he'll use nuclear weapons if we try to take back, Ukraine for Crimea, or Ukraine, I should say Ukraine tries to take back Crimea. And I think I'm trying to remember. Oh, I think that, not I think, that is why we have had this BS discussion from the beginning about, thank you, Flower Lady. That is a very cool visual. Thank you for that. We've had this thing from the beginning with, remember the big fighter jets that Poland had, and Poland had said, hey, we're happy to give these jets to the Ukrainians. Thank you, Paramarine, to the Ukrainians, so long as they are transported. We'll send them to Germany, the American base there, and then you can pass them off from the base there. And Germany and America both went, right, don't do it. No fighter jets. Tanks, we waited until last week for NATO to finally agree to the tanks. The Brits did it, I think, 2 weeks before, but even Britain waited until 3-4 weeks ago. Everybody else waited until a week or 2 weeks ago to announce the tanks. And now what's happening? Well, Russia's planning a big offensive, possibly in 2 to 3 weeks, and another even bigger offensive, possibly the end of March, early April. And guess what? Those tanks probably aren't going to be there in time because we dragged our feet. We keep dragging our feet. I think the Ukrainians even said this at one point. They said, stop dragging your feet because you keep saying no, and then you wait a bunch of months, and then you give us the weapons anyway, but you always give it to us too late. Not too late, but too late in the sense that there's already a lot of damage caused, and we could have stopped a lot of the damage had we had the weapons. And this tank thing is another example. It's not clear Ukraine's going to get the tanks in time. They needed these tanks to stop the spring offensive by the Russians and to start their own spring offensive. Thank you, Erica. Aflac with the duck. Sasha is asleep in my bedroom, right? Oh, she's asleep in my bathroom right now. She's taking I don't know why. She ate and she's taking a little break, my dog. And someone's asking how she's doing. She's doing fine, but taking a break in the other room. So when we hear Pentagon officials telling people on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Congress that, it's unlikely the Ukrainians could take back all of their land this year. That's because we're not giving them the means to take back their land this year because we don't want them to take back their land this year. And it is an inherent contradiction in what we're doing. We don't want the Russians to win. We don't want the Ukrainians to lose, but we don't want the Ukrainians to win either. Thank you. Oh, Arifa, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Thank you for that. So that we're in this weird, I keep saying push me, pull you, right? With like Dr. Doolittle or whatever, but this back and forth. And, we've got to make up our minds because the problem is we're doing it halfway and half-assed. And it means just that we're helping Ukraine. Frankly, we're helping Ukraine actually, that's funny. Spire, no, that's a good, yeah. Spire is posting on, I remember this quote. Spire is posting on Twitch, the quote from Churchill. You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. I mean, and I will say, there is something to be said for cool heads. There is something to be said for reticence, right? For thinking it through. We don't want the Russians to go crazy, right? Blah, blah, blah. I appreciate that. Thank you, Kanowski, for the guitar. So I appreciate that. But there's also something to be said for when you are fighting a battle. I mean, and I'm sorry, again, I am not the military guy. I am the foreign policy guy. But in foreign policy, we've studied wars like going back, forever. And it is a problem when you try to fight halfway, because when you fight halfway, you don't win. Now, you don't fight all the way, meaning use nuclear weapons or whatever. We've talked about that. Thank you, Kanowski, for the flowers. But when you have weapons available that are not unthinkable, right? We have the tanks. We could have done them earlier. Oh, thank you, Erica. I don't get that one. I don't know if I've ever gotten the cheer squad. That's very cool. Thank you. I don't know. I mean, I'm repeating myself. It just really pisses me off. But yeah, so the general. Now, actually, what I saw somebody smart say on Twitter today, they said, yeah, have you noticed how the generals who are gone, basically General Wesley Clark, a couple of them, Stavridis, who's an admiral, Ben Hodges, the generals who are gone and can speak freely are all the ones saying, we need to be pouring weapons in there. We need to get them planes and everything. We need to get them planes. We need to get them the long-range rockets, the rockets that can go 200 miles, 300 kilometers that we're refusing to give them. And it's the generals who are still working for Biden who can't say it because, of course, it would be wrong for them. They shouldn't say. I was thinking of the Powell Doctrine. That's exactly what I was thinking. Somebody pull it up if you can, Papa B, because Papa B was just mentioning the Powell Doctrine. Thank you, Lake Lady. And it was Colin Powell, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the American military, who was our top military official during the first Gulf War. Sort of famous. Powell had a number of jobs. Powell was our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I believe, during our first Gulf War, right? Because then under the Bush White House, he then was Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, excuse me. He was Secretary of State because he was giving the horrible bullshit. Sorry, I don't mean to swear on my lives. He was giving the BS lies during the second Gulf War about Saddam having, remember those tubes, whatever the hell they were, and all the weapons of mass destruction. But during the first Gulf War, he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top military guy. General Petraeus has been saying it as well. Thank you, Cliff, for that. But the Powell Doctrine, I'm forgetting the details of it, but it was basically sort of his lesson, not even lessons, his rules for going to war. Let me pull it up. What the hell? Let's pull it up because this is, I think it's an interesting. One second, guys. I'm going to pull this up because why not? I mean, it's an interesting sort of thing, and it's not really that arcane. Powell Doctrine. I might as well read it to you really quick. The Powell Doctrine states that a list of questions all have to be answered in the affirmative, yes, before military action is taken by the U.S. Is it a vital national security interest is a vital national security interest threatened? Do we have a clear, attainable objective? And have the risks and costs been fully and frankly analyzed? Okay. I mean, I think it needs to be more than that, which is also, and are we willing to fully attempt to achieve our objective? Because that's what's happening here is we're going halfway. We probably can achieve our objective, but we're only going halfway because we're too afraid. And honestly, it's just whatever. Very annoying. Let me keep going here. Thank you again for the gifts. Keep them coming. I appreciate all of them. The Swiss. This is okay. I'm going long again today, but there's good news here. All right. I'm going to talk about the Swiss thing. The rest of the news doesn't really matter. Now, the rest of the stories don't matter. The rest are just kind of fun stories at the end. I'm going to end with the Swiss story that's really interesting. Bloomberg has an article up about Switzerland. Now, Switzerland because of its neutrality, lots of funny rules, right? But Switzerland did join in the banking sanctions, which was huge at the beginning of the war, right? Well, Bloomberg is reporting this. I'm just going to read you a couple paragraphs. It's fascinating how Switzerland is debating helping militarily, kind of, sort of. But again, for Switzerland, this is a big deal if they can pull it off. In a bunker in mountainous eastern Switzerland, nearly 100 Leopard tanks have been mothballed for almost a decade. These are the tanks that Germany and everybody are giving Ukraine, destined for decommissioning in the belief that armored warfare in Europe was a thing of the past. Remember, we've talked about this, that initially the Europeans had lots of tanks because they were afraid of the Soviet Union and the Russians rushing across Europe, and there would be a land battle, a land war in Europe, and you need tanks for that. Well, once the Soviet Union dissolved, the thinking was, hey, Russia's not a threat anymore, right? Well, now we realize Russia's a threat again, and the tanks. So these tanks were mothballed, 100 of them, in preparation for the fact that they don't need tanks anymore like they did in the past. Shipping weapons directly to the battlefield in Ukraine is out of the question. But mainstream politicians in Switzerland are now calling for the Leopard tanks to be sold for a nominal fee to Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, replacing the tanks that their governments plan to send Ukraine. So the idea is, what's being proposed is that the Swiss replace the Leopard tanks of any country that wants to send its Leopard tanks to Ukraine. So, because basically, under normal circumstances, Switzerland could sell its Leopard tanks to these countries anyway, right? So that would be allowed. But it would make it easier for those other countries to give even more tanks to Ukraine, right? Because they no longer have to worry. I mean, bottom line, you know how there's been a debate in America, there's been a debate in the UK as to, by sending these weapons to Ukraine, are we now putting ourselves at a disadvantage that our military is not fully prepared for war? Well, this way it would be, because, right, Germany gives 14 tanks, they get 4, or whoever. In this case, it's not Germany, it's the Czech Republic, it's Slovakia, or whoever. Any case, interesting idea. The other idea they came up with, hang on here, right? Oh, on Thursday, which is today, Swiss members of parliament debated a bill gaining some traction in the parliament that would allow Germany, Spain, and Denmark to ship Swiss-made ammunition to the front as well. In a recent poll, more than half the population in Switzerland broadly favored allowing re-exports of Swiss-made ammunition to help Ukraine's war effort. That's pretty good. It's more than half. I mean, it's not an overwhelming number, but it's still more than half. But I thought that was pretty cool. All right. Let's go do questions, because I've been talking a lot, although it's been a lot of interesting news again today. All right. You all submit your questions via the Q&A link in my profile. Also, feel free to comment on any of this stuff. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be your take on some of the stories we've talked about, or any other stories, really. Oh, I don't know about that. That's interesting. Otanbot is saying sources are predicting Stoltenberg's extension at NATO. Stoltenberg is the Secretary General of NATO, basically not the Supreme Allied Commander, who's the military head. I guess you'd kind of call it the political head, except that, of course, his job is very strange to me, because obviously NATO is a bunch of independent countries, right? So we all decide what we want to do, and we sort of decide, together. Thank you, Annie, for the flowers there, or for the feathers there. But there still is this Secretary General of NATO as well. I would say he's in some ways he's a figurehead. I think that's true, right? I think that's true, because he's been very upfront about supporting Ukraine. I'd say he's even been ahead of NATO overall, because some of his comments have been, I remember months ago, him sort of saying, we've got to give them all the support we can, everything they need. It was stuff that it felt like it was kind of pushing the NATO countries to give more, was my sense of him. Any case, I think it's great if they renew him. I thought they were talking as well about a woman possibly taking over. Thank you for the gift there. Who is that? Knausi? I don't remember who it was. There was a woman they were talking about. Wasn't a German woman, was it? Who was it? Anybody remember? Who was the woman they were thinking of taking over the Secretary General of NATO? Anyway, he'd be very good. Because he's been great. Daniel O'Neill. A camel is a horse designed by committee. I'm vaguely familiar with the quote. That's funny. Do you think NATO has pre-agreed a range of suitable responses for any potential use of weapons of mass destruction by Russia? Yes. Okay. Yes, but it is possible that maybe they couldn't agree, right? Couldn't you see Hungary being a pain in the ass about what we do in response to, anything? I mean, weapons of mass destruction means biological weapons, chemical weapons, or nuclear weapons. Hungary, I could absolutely see being a pain in the ass about everything. Turkey, I could see being a partial pain in the ass just because, right? But Hungary especially, forget it. I don't know if you'd have issues with Bulgaria and some of the others. I don't know, right? But I doubt it as much. I'd be a little worried as well, frankly, about France and Germany. I mean, about whether they might pull punches at all. I don't know. But so the point is, absolutely positively NATO has already tried to agree on what the escalation is. And by the way, I think the escalation, my guess is it's very complicated because, for example, nuclear device. What kind of nuclear device? Small nuke, large nuke. Well, if it's a small nuke, how small? What if, for example, I mean, I'm a lawyer, and one of the things they teach you in the law is to come up with sort of all sorts of hypotheticals to try to force you to refine your position. So, for example, yes, we should absolutely do X, Y, and Z if Putin uses nukes. Well, like I said, what if it's a small nuke? Does that matter? Meaning, you can drop a nuke that can vaporize all of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, and kill 2 million people, or 3 million, however many they've got. Or you could do a small nuke that kills some troops, that blows up a military headquarters. Or what if Putin decides to blow up a nuke in a Ukrainian battlefield where nobody is located, just to send a message that we better watch it? Then what do? Right? Do you treat a sole small nuclear weapon, a tactical nuke it's called, in a battlefield with nobody present, so no human beings are killed? Do you treat that the same way that you would a nuclear weapon dropped on Kyiv? Right? But you get where this is where it gets very complicated. Now, I think NATO would have to figure that out. I guarantee you the president of the United States already has, his options memo laid out. And the people in the Pentagon already thought it through and said, okay, big nuke, small nuke, what if it's against civilians? What if it's against military? What if, God forbid, for example, too, what if it isn't an attack on Poland, but what if it's in Ukraine and it blows into Poland or blows into Romania or blows into NATO, right? Into NATO countries. Or, okay, a lot of folks are saying, truthfully saying on TikTok, a nuke is a nuke. But that's a possible response as well, which is to say, it doesn't matter. We need to make it clear to Putin, a nuke is a nuke. Wherever you use it, whatever size it is, we are going to do X, Y, and Z. In any case, yes, Daniel, that was a very long way of saying that I think NATO will have already pre-agreed on the response if they were able to get agreement. But I guarantee you somebody has tried. Or would there be an ensuing political debate to agree? My guess is we'd have the political debate anyway, because part of the problem you're going to have with this, thank you, Nathan, for the guitar. Part of the problem you're going to have with this is, my guess, no country is going to want to decide for the reason I just told you. They're not going to say, well, yes, America, we give you a right. We give you permission, meaning NATO has agreed that America can go in and blow up the Russian fleet in Sevastopol, which is Russia's huge fleet here in occupied Crimea. Well, as I said, maybe, but you'd be more willing to do that if they blew up a nuke in Kyiv than if they blew up a small nuke in an empty field. So you, being another country, whether you're France, Germany, or Italy, or anybody else, might say, well, in principle, yes. If it were me, I would say in principle, yes. But honestly, we're going to need to vote again if they do use a nuke or if they do use chemical or biological. Because here's the other thing too, chemical or biological, who decides if they used it, right? You've got to prove they used it. You've got to prove it was the Russians. Thank you, Pam, for that. You've got to prove it was used, that this is a chemical weapon. This is a biological weapon. B, prove that it was the Russians. Because, for example, it's crazy, but could China, could some Middle Eastern terrorist group, could somebody else want to get into Ukraine and use a weapon of mass destruction in order to get the superpowers, the West and Russia blowing each other up? It's crazy. A terrorist group? Certainly. Like, I don't know about China. That might be a little much for China, but terrorists. So you would want to, if I were approving it as a NATO member, I'd say, sure, but I need to see the proof first of that this is real. Anyway, you get it. Anyway, good question, Daniel. Oops, sorry, let me just scroll down. All right, let me pull up. I saw that, yeah, Otanbot is mentioning Israel talking about, considering sending Iron Dome to Ukraine. The problem is that was a quote that Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, gave to CNN yesterday. And he simply said some sort of, well, we're considering a lot of, basically, when they said, well, will Israel send military aid to Ukraine? Well, we're thinking about it. Okay, that was sort of the answer. It didn't really mean much. Why we've asked this before. I mean, it's a good question. Annie is asking, why do we continue to talk publicly about specific weapons, their capabilities, and literal dates Ukraine will have them? I don't know. Unless it's disinformation, I don't get it. You know, because wouldn't you think that basically, certainly tanks, nobody should be talking publicly about when the tanks are going to get there. Nobody should, right? I mean, when the British tanks, when the German tanks from the various countries, right? Because we've got Poland, we've got maybe Norway, we've got, well, hell, there may be 12 European countries, possibly, that are sending German tanks to Ukraine. American, Abrams tanks. Nobody should be talking publicly at all about when the tanks. The only possible, there's two possibilities that I can think of. One, we're lying. And we're trying, okay, maybe the tanks are already there. Exactly. That maybe we're lying and it's all disinformation. Maybe. The other possibility is that Russia knows that basically to get the tanks there, it's impossible for Russia not to know that we're shipping them. Now, maybe it's hard for Russia to know when they cross the border, which shipment they're in. We talked about this the other day, like why isn't Russia blowing up more of the equipment that crosses the border? But if we were to say, look, Russia's got enough intelligence, they've got their spy satellites, they've got everything else, they know when we're sending stuff. If that's the case, then maybe that's why we talk about it, because Russia already knows, so we might as well let our own population know. Because, our people aren't stupid. And what I mean is, our military folks know what they should and shouldn't say public. And you would have to have an overriding reason for our governments to go public with this stuff. So I'm hoping. UK is going to double the number of Ukrainian troops it will train. Are there new recruits or ones taken from the theater? Oh, I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? It depends what they're being trained. My guess, this is an interesting question because the people being trained are being trained on a few different things from what we know, right? There is training for specific weapon systems. I mean, not just the Brits, but in general, right? We know that there's training. For example, the Brits are starting training on using the Challenger 2 tanks, the British tanks. The Americans are going to start training on the Abrams tanks. The Poles, and I think it was Poland, Switzerland, and maybe Germany, there are going to be training centers for how to use, I believe, the Leopard tanks. There's also training going on. Thank you, Bonnie, for the hedgehog, the groundhog. It's Groundhog Day. I forgot about that. I should have picked the groundhog as my goal for today. I wasn't even thinking that today's Groundhog Day. Totally forgot about that. Thanks for that. The Patriot missile systems. Anyway, all of these things you need training for. But there's another thing of training going on that's really important is the combined arms training. And that's been happening as well in a number of these countries. And the question then, and combined arms training basically means, and again, the military folks can tell you better, but in a nutshell, I always compare it to playing a computer game, okay? And you've got your tanks, you've got your infantry, the guys on the ground with their guns, you've got the guys in the tanks, you've got the support vehicles, right? The infantry fighting vehicles that the infantry goes in and travel. You've got artillery that shoot the big guns that go 25 miles, right? You've got airplanes, fighter jets. You've got drones. You could have submarines and boats. You've got to figure out how to use all of those together, because you don't just use one of them. You don't just say, I'm attacking with tanks. No, the tanks have to have somebody protecting them. That could be fighter jets, for example. You don't just attack with ground. Now, the Russians are just attacking with ground troops, but it's crazy. You would typically, from what I've read, you'd have the artillery, for example, shoot first and blow up a lot of the area before the ground troops come in. So everybody, all these vehicles and things help protect each other. Okay, that is combined arms training. The question then becomes, for example, with tanks, we know that they've talked about training Ukrainian tankers on using the tanks. In other words, Ukrainian soldiers who already know how to use Ukrainian tanks, we would be training them on how to use the British, the German, and the American tanks because they already know how to use tanks. So it's easier for them to learn, and they would learn more quickly than somebody just learning to drive a tank from scratch. So in that case, you'd want somebody who's an existing soldier who has already driven tanks, okay? But by doing that, you're taking him out of the battlefield for a couple months. That's a problem, right? Because now some of your top tankers, your top tank drivers and top tank crews are not operating right in Ukraine. Same thing for the combined arms training. Do you take your top soldiers for the combined arms training, or do you take the neutral soldiers? I'm going to guess you wouldn't want new soldiers. I would guess you'd want experienced soldiers, because literally you're talking about how you interact with each other and having, somebody kind of running it. That, to me, that sounds like you'd want people you'd have to have people experienced, right? Because the combined arms training isn't teaching you how to run a tank. It's teaching you how to, now that you know how to run a tank, we're going to teach you how to use your tank in concert with artillery and vehicles and airplanes and everything else, right? So now that I'm thinking it through, it makes me feel like the training almost would have to be for pre-existing Ukrainian experienced troops, and not just people who are entering the military this month, right? That would be basic training in Ukraine. So, all right, there we go. We worked it through. That's my guess. Puska, what's his name? Puska. Oh God, it's like Puxta, Puxta, Puxta County Phil, or whatever it is, or I can never pronounce it. The groundhog. Let me pull up another question here on TikTok. Chinese balloon. All right, Chinese spy balloon over the U.S. So yes, there is a Chinese spy balloon flying over the U.S. NORAD, our folks who track such things, are following it. But here's the creepy thing. This isn't Ukraine, but it's a big story happening right now. Reportedly, we did not know the balloon was up there, and it was spotted first by passengers on an airplane that looked out their windows and saw the balloon out their window. And that's how we saw it. Now, that's a little scary, because you wouldn't want this balloon, like, taking down an airplane, going into the engine or something. Biden reportedly, this story came out recently, right before I came on with you guys. Biden reportedly told the military, shoot it down. Well, the military said, we don't think so, because their concern, it's got equipment on it, of course. Their concern is that it comes down over a civilian area and kills somebody. What if it falls on somebody's house? What if it, whatever? So, I mean, I guess part of the question is, well, in any case, that's what's going on. So that's what's up with the balloon. Now, let me see. Yep. Rob Wall was just saying the same thing. Yep. Been spotted over U.S. airspace for a couple days. One of the possibilities is that you shoot it down after it's over the sea. The problem is it's already relayed its information, I'm assuming, to China. So you really want to take it down now. I don't know how big it is, but my guess is it's the equipment. Obviously, there's spy equipment on there, that it's enough equipment that it would kill somebody, and it would kill people in a home if it hits the home. So you would have to knock it down over some really empty part of the country, and the empty parts of the country, first of all, are out west. So if it's already out east, thank you, Benji, for the pearls, or for the oyster pearl. If it's already out east, and I don't know if it is, we've got more population out here. You'd have to do it right. It would have to be over Montana, or even Wyoming, or the Midwest, maybe Nebraska, maybe Oklahoma, but is it there? Anyway, that's what's going on. There are not currently peace talks taking place at all, because neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians want to have them. The Russians are just refusing in general. The Ukrainians are refusing peace talks, but it kind of makes sense why they're refusing, because, as I've shown before, 18% of Ukraine is currently occupied by Russia. Okay, all of this. Russia didn't invade in order to stop Ukraine from, developing nuclear weapons or something, right? There isn't anything Ukraine can trade for getting rid of Russia out of its territory. So there's, by negotiating it, there's nothing for Ukraine to negotiate, right? They want their land back. The other problem is that while the negotiation is taking place, it would be assumed that you would have a ceasefire. Well, currently the ceasefire helps the Russians, because the Russians are occupying Ukraine. It would give the Russians more time to dig in and to basically have their troops protect themselves better against a future Ukrainian attack. So a ceasefire right now, is even though the Russians don't want it. Thank you. No, boy, Newith. I'm going to call you Newith for the corgi. Even though the Russians don't really want it either, it would be to Russia's advantage and Ukraine's disadvantage if it happened, because any kind of ceasefire would help Russia and would only make it harder for Ukraine to get its land back. So there. Sorry, I have the map up, so obviously you guys are putting up the beers. What else we got going here? Let me see. I'll look for another question or two. Maybe we'll finish not on time, but I'll go a little bit longer because we were late on the not late, but I went late on the news because I wanted to do a Discord tonight too, because I haven't been on Discord all week. So we will do a Discord tonight as well. Well, that's it. What if Russia nukes itself and blames the US and Europe or the Americans? I mean, would you put it past Putin? No. I mean, Putin, you can Google this. It is thought. Thank you, Big J or BJG for the hearts there. It is thought that Putin blew up an apartment building in Moscow back, and I always forget the year. I want to say 1999, or it was 2003. I forget which year, but it was at the very beginning, and he basically used it to consolidate power in Russia because he pretended it was God, I'm forgetting again, guys. Help me out here. 1999. Chechen terrorists, I want to say. Were they Chechen terrorists? Help me here. I think so. They were claiming, but basically he was claiming it was terrorists from some of these other regions. Chechen? Okay, Chechen war. It was Chechens. Yep. Chechen terrorists. And that, these evil other people blew up this building in Moscow. So we've got to get tough, and I'm your strong man to do it. It was a lie. Most people think it was a lie. And the thinking is that Putin himself had the apartment building blown up and killed all the people in Moscow. I would not, even without that information, I would not put it past Putin to blow up a weapon and kill Russians in order to say, hey, this is great, right? This is great. We can just, we can just use it against NATO. The question is, does it get him? I mean, it's now okay. This was in the movie I just watched the other night, where they were trying to pretend it was the Russian breakaway, whatever, was trying to pretend it was the Americans blowing up a weapon in the Czech Republic. But it was the Jack Ryan TV show this year. Yeah, that's the new Jack Ryan plot. I'm not ruining anything for you. Don't worry. I haven't told you what happens. But I guess we'd have to think how it benefits Russia for that to happen, and could they even pull it off? Thank you, Karen. Could they even pull off making it look like a nuke blowing up was an American nuke? I mean, and if it was an American nuke on Russian soil, Russia would almost have to blow up a nuke on our soil, and that would start a nuclear war anyway. So my only thing is I'm just not sure how it benefits, how it would benefit Putin, but I wouldn't put it past him if he could find a reason for it to benefit. Yeah, you can fingerprint nuclear explosions, right? They would almost have to steal one of our bombs. But again, you'd have to have a reason for why they would do it. Meaning, how would Putin turn it to his advantage? Thank you, Grayson. I don't know. That's interesting. Kelly Fonts is saying, I wonder if the recent house cleaning in Ukraine regarding corruption and collaborators, and there's been even more either arrests or firings today of more Ukrainian officials for corruption. So they're clearly getting tough on that. Means that they are getting ready to start a counteroffensive before even Russia's. The Ukrainians did a mass firing before. Well, I don't know. Interesting. No idea. All right, one more question, and then we'll do our wrap up here. Oops. I don't know. Does anybody know this? It's a good question from Josh. Does Ukraine have any new troops? I thought all troops have been fighting all year. Okay, first of all, the same troops can't fight all year because they'd be exhausted. So they would have to switch them out. That doesn't mean that Ukraine isn't switching them out with troops they already have, but who haven't been at the front. I know in the last year, they've been calling people up. We know that because we know people who got called up for military service, right? A lot of Ukrainian men have been called up. I don't know that everybody's been called up, but a lot have been called up. So, I mean, I guess the question is, I don't know if anybody who's up on either the Ukrainians are on with us tonight, is at what has has Ukrainian military recruitment stopped? Did it stop a number of months ago, or is it ongoing? Right? Or did it stop like 6 months ago and there's been no new recruitment since then, and now Ukraine's just using the same military guys? I would think if Ukraine was smart, okay, there you go. Yeah, Taras is saying it didn't stop. I was just going to say, I would think if they were smart, they would continue the recruitment because, and Taras is in Kyiv. Okay, yeah, no, that would be my thought, because with the talk of Russia possibly getting 500,000 men in some new offensive, Ukraine needs to build up as big an army as it can at this point. So there'd be no reason not to. Taras Grigorovich. Yeah, nice. Anyway, hello. Thank you, Taras, for weighing in on that. Okay, so there you go. There's your answer. Thank you. I knew Ukrainian would know. But yeah, it makes sense, because why would they stop recruiting? Exactly. Yeah. All right, guys, let me do a quick recap, and then we'll call it quits so I can go over to the Discord. We will hang out on the Discord tonight. It's discord.aravosis.com. Yeah, I've mixed up my notes here. Discord.aravosis.com, and it's our community where we hang out. We have an after show. You can find the after show all the way in the left on the bottom. Look for voice channels, and I think it's called John's After Party or something like that. Let me figure out. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. I still had my notes from yesterday's show here. I was screwing that up. Yeah, Six Evo, I'll mention it. When I do the recap, I'll mention the Putins. Six Evo was asking me to do the sort of the Putin threats again. Okay, so yeah, so the first story, actually the first thing I was talking about was we're going to have a coffee talk on Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern time US, and basically hang out with the TikTok subscribers. They're the paid supporters on TikTok. So you guys know who you are. There's like 125 of you or something like that. Anybody who wants to, on the live, you should see a button that says subscribe, maybe during the live, I hope, at the top of the screen, maybe. And basically it's like $6 a month. You support the subscriber, we get a portion of the money, and we can give you any perks we want. And the perk I give you is, well, you get the little thing next to your name, SNN, which shows people that you're a supporter. But also, I do a thing every week. I do a coffee talk, basically Saturday mornings every week for folks, for the subscribers only. If it's not on the screen, I have no idea. Can somebody else, while I'm doing this, just look around and see if it's anywhere on the screen that you can find it for, just to tell folks. So anyway, Moscow is hinting that it is looking to do something to gain the world's attention on February 24th. The big concern happening now from the Ukrainians, but also from we've heard this from former British military leaders the other day as well. There is concern that the Russians may be planning, thank you, Timothy, maybe planning another counteroffensive. Oh, and the dog is back. She's under the table, joining. Hello, you. There you go. Covering her up. She's under the table in her bed under my chair. I've got like five beds for my dog in my 1-bedroom apartment, because what do you do? She's my baby. In any case, the concern is that first we were concerned that the Russians were going to have a big counteroffensive in the spring. Remember? That was the first big one. Now the concern is whether the Russians are going to have an earlier counteroffensive, something maybe as early as 2 to 3 weeks from now, to commemorate or in line with the anniversary of the Russian invasion. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was on February 24th. We are now February 2nd, which means we're almost 3 weeks away from the invasion. So the concern is, are the Russians planning some, new massive push, several 100,000 troops racing across the border? I mean, who knows? But that's the concern. So just keep in mind, as these days go on, you're going to see more and more talk about that. The Kremlin is upset that the tanks are coming. The spokesman for the Russian government made a comment about how, like, now we're going to come after you. And it was sort of like, really? Like, you aren't, like, why aren't you already coming after Ukraine already? They basically suggested they were going to use, even more weapons against them or something. And it was like, shouldn't you already be doing that? But whatever. Putin threatened nuclear war again in a speech. Blah, blah. Again, blah, 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 blah. We don't care anymore. A new bust of Stalin was erected in Volgograd on Wednesday. That's just creepy considering Stalin killed tens of millions of Soviets, including millions of Ukrainians. Two more Russian missiles struck eastern Ukraine today, the city of Kramatorsk. This was the city the Russians attacked yesterday and blew up and utterly destroyed a residential apartment building. And the Russians decided to attack the same town today using S-300 missiles, which are missiles usually used for going after airplanes. And when you shoot them at civilian targets or cities, they can go anywhere. They really can't aim them. So basically, the Russians just wanted to kill civilians. And that's what they did, which is a war crime. Big surprise. Politico reported that the Pentagon doesn't think Ukraine can retake Crimea this year. Four top Pentagon officials did a classified briefing to members of the U.S. House of Representatives today, saying that I say it's because we're not giving Ukraine the weapons it needs to take back Crimea. Bloomberg is reporting that Switzerland is talking about possibly a unique way of helping Ukraine get more tanks by using almost 100 Swiss tanks that were going to be decommissioned and selling them for a nominal fee to countries like Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, thus freeing up those countries to give their tanks to Ukraine, right? So kind of a cute idea. And the Swiss are also debating in Parliament whether to allow the re-export of Swiss-made ammunition to Ukraine as well, meaning other countries in Europe that already use Swiss ammunition for artillery and stuff like that, they currently cannot give their ammunition or even sell it or whatever to Ukraine because, as we talked about before, typically when a country sells weapons, the US, France, anybody, Germany, we include in the contract the requirement that if you want to sell the weapons again to a third country or just give them away, you've got to ask our permission first. Well, the Swiss saying, look, we're not aligned. Nobody can give our weapons to Ukraine. They're debating whether, in fact, they might say yes to the ammunition. Big deal. The European Union adopted a new $546 million military assistance package for Ukraine today. A relatively new Crimean Tatar guerrilla group claimed it killed 2 Russian soldiers with an IED in southern Crimea. IED is basically a roadside bomb. Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and Poland have called for athletes from Russia and Belarus to be banned from competing in any sports events while the war in Ukraine continues. Latvia also said yesterday that it may boycott the Olympics if the Olympics permit Russian or Belarusian troops. And finally, kind of a weird story. Didn't have time to get to this, but I'll mention it now. North Korea's government, this is according to a South Korean newspaper, North Korea's government intends to send up to 500 soldiers or police personnel to Russian-occupied Donetsk and Luhansk, which are the two easternmost provinces in Ukraine, to take part in reconstruction efforts, on behalf of the Russians. Very weird. I mean, I'm hard pressed to think what possible expertise could the North Koreans bring to help Russia. It's actually really embarrassing that Russia would go to North Korea. I mean, probably the most backward country on the planet in some ways. I mean, go to North Korea to help because Russia needs help rebuilding infrastructure in eastern Ukraine that it's stolen. I wrote on here, weird story. It's a weird story. All right, guys. So there you go. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me. I will go to the Discord right now. We're a little late, but it's okay. I'll go over maybe 20 minutes, hang over to the Discord, and we'll all hang and chat. As I said, go over, scroll all the way down, and thank you, Hazel. Scroll all the way down and look for the voice channels, and you'll see John's after party or after show. I think I call it the after party. And otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time US for tomorrow's show about tomorrow's news from Ukraine. And don't forget, any of the TikTok subscribers, the paid subscribers on TikTok, you can join me Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time US, and I will have a special show just hanging out with you guys, closed to the world except you, to thank you. So thank you for that. Thank you, Magical. All right, guys, let me sign off. Thank you, BJG. I'm going to sign off and join you guys over at the Discord, okay? See you guys tomorrow. Thanks again, as always. Thank you, guys.